Not to embarrass you, Katie, but
Well, Katie, I don't think I've met you
Hey,
before.
I feel very welcome.
cool. Hi, everybody. We're here to do this again, and hopefully you feel positively about that. If you didn't, I can't imagine you'd be watching. But I'm here with a bunch of my Patreon patrons, and we're just going to hang out for the next hour or so and talk about whatever comes up. Actually, we do kind of sort of have a topic this month, thanks to our good buddy Nicholas here. But before that, we were having just the most lovely chat before I hit the go live button about the Great Replacement and white genocide, because that's what we talk about on our own time before the show starts.
Speak for yourself. I'm trying to find the revolution.
What else is new?
Yeah.
Yeah, Winston, if you want to talk about the guy who went to the North Sentinelese tribe, go ahead. It's a very short story.
Thanks. I think by the time he was in his 20s, he realized. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Just checking. I think by the time he was in his 20s, he realized he had no qualifications, and it was all thanks to Christianity. So he committed suicide and tried to make it look like he was going there to proselytize, so that he could go to heaven.
That makes more sense than what he actually did. I mean,
he probably knew he'd never get a job outside McDonald's or sweeping floors.
It better make sense to somebody, because it makes none to me.
Yeah, I mean, that is something though that I feel like. I mean, I don't know. It's a challenge to my natural tendencies as to who I'm sympathetic with, because like people who are raised in that kind of like very, very closed off, very conservative fundamentalist Christian culture where they're raised from birth to be really, really skeptical of the outside world, and they don't get a proper education, especially when it comes to like science and history. They basically get nothing, and then they get thrown out into the outside world, and it's like, okay, go have fun, and it's like, God damn it, you're not preparing people to live in the world at all.
Into the deep end of the pool and expecting them to swim.
Yeah.
At least the Amish have Rumspringa.
Which they don't prepare them for either, but let's...
Now, here's my question as it comes to Rumspringa.
Oh, at least you don't have to pay for petrol when you're Amish. You just take your horse and buggy everywhere.
How much prep do you get before you go into Rumspringa, or they just drop them into the deep end of the pool, give them a year, and let them figure it out?
See, the thing is, they actually do get some, because it's not like they have to shun the outside world completely. The idea is that they always return to it. So, like, there's a lot of Amish that work. If you go to Reading Terminal Market in Philadelphia, there's whole booths set up by Amish. In fact, like a good portion of that is actually Amish people selling their wares. So they interact with outside people, and there are some classes that get people before they go. How well it prepares them depends on the community they come from, really.
Yeah. Are you going to say something, Malice?
Yeah, despite what the TV show would have you believe, a lot of Rumspringa is families putting them in a home of people who support the Amish community and literally just shelter them until Rumspringa is over.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they're gonna get their own apartment. They're gonna get a job, and they're gonna like integrate into society fully for like a whole year. That's definitely not what's happening.
Right, they're just getting more proximity than they would normally get.
Yeah. But that is a good point, though, Joe. Like, a lot of Amish people do. I mean, it's not like they stay on the farm their whole lives. Like many Amish people have jobs, like in the world. And like the whole idea, like that they have to have this special little phase, where they go out into the real world is kind of silly when many of them live amongst the English, like regularly.
Live amongst us.
Especially since and as far as even the technology, if it's for business, it's okay. You see at Reading Terminal Market, there's Amish people with credit card machines and cell phones and stuff like that, but only for business. You're not supposed to use it for your personal use.
Right, exactly.
Whatever nonsense.
It's almost as bad as Atlas Shrugged, but much shorter.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing I always think kind of funny about the Amish is I always thought that the Mennonites were like kind of a liberal breakoff of the Amish, and I found it's actually the opposite. Is the Mennonites were first, and the Amish were like, "You people are too liberal."
Just ask Harrison Ford.
So it's
Yeah,
like
right.
the Protestants who left England because it was too liberal.
Yeah, that sounds
Exactly.
that sounds like the Pilgrims.
Exactly.
Okay, let's stop talking about these horrible things. We're talking about white genocide, right?
Right.
That is a white genocide kind of like
So,
conspiracy
all
theory.
right, guys. So step one.
Can't we just spay and neuter all the Republicans?
Wait,
How much
wait.
would that
Yeah.
cost?
I have a final solution.
Oh, very good.
Oh,
I have a modest proposal.
wow. There we go.
Oh,
boy.
eating the rich. Remember, you cook the rich into curry,
I
we
love,
can avoid some of the food
I-
poisoning.
I love that Winston threw in a Jonathan Swift joke
Yes.
right after Alice's Holocaust joke, so that to pep us back up.
Well, the best I can come up with is put the lime in the
Why don't
coconut
we
and
just
drink it
pay
together.
doctors to
No, no, no.
neuter and spay every Republican? How much would that cost?
I'll do
Big
it
government.
Cheaper
do it
than the
for
law.
It's big government going.
Hey,
People are gonna.
Alex, you have to start using the code word. It's ultimate answer, not final.
Until people
Yeah.
figure that out, then they'll have another code
Yeah.
word.
Who here has seen Conspiracy? The thing that HBO did about 4 or 5 years ago?
I
Because
have.
I believe the dog whistle in that one was immigration or something like that.
Migration,
they-
usually.
Immigration has been a thing for a while.
There was some euphemism that they used, and the astonishing thing is you got a bunch of Nazis gathered around a table and they're talking about this, for whatever reason, they can't come right out and say, okay, we're talking about genocide here,
So not to be the jerk off that gets us back on track, but I think we had a topic for today, right, Steve?
Yes, thank you, Brett. Yes, we did. Yeah, Nicholas, you wanted. God damn it, Brett! I
know.
already got some random geek over here telling me what to do. I don't need you directing this shit. Too.
They're merely just suggestions.
I know.
Well, Geek needs his own hangout, I think, is what it boils down to.
Oh, I do that every week.
Yeah, he has-
Little Ono and Tom
Yeah, he has
McDonald
one.
on Social Justice Alchemy. We already got that. But anyway, Nick, as he takes a drink, it's like, I'm just going to sit over here, wait till it's my turn.
Okay.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Okay, so Nick wanted to talk. So Nick, it's all yours, my friend.
Actually, I do have one thing to add with you.
Okay.
Sorry, just wanted to, look, the crux of this whole thing, what's so stupid about it is these people who believe in this kind of conspiracy theory. See, they have this fear that all the other groups in the world, all the other minorities, ethnicities, whatever, are just chomping at the bit to get revenge for everything we've ever done to them. And the second there are a few more of them than there are of us, they're just going to go like, now let's do everything they did to us as payback. And it's just stupid. It's just a dumb fantasy.
Yeah, totally.
More insidious than that, though, because they're talking about peaceful white genocide. They're talking about people intermarrying and having babies that aren't completely white as white genocide.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah, we've seen from all the messed up dog breeds what happens.
Someone outside of your race, according to these people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we've seen this happen with dogs. We have bred so many poor, deformed little dogs by not letting them mix with other breeds. It's like, hey, mine has a scrunched up face. Mine has really loose skin. Mine doesn't even have a snout. It's
Mine can't give birth without dying,
healthy.
so we need to give her a C-section.
Yeah.
My
right.
point is, let's not do this to humans. Let
My
people
point
mix.
This is how we got the English. I mean, let's not do it again.
To quote Eddie,
Okay, now
quote Eddie Izzard, because it's a bad idea when cousins marry.
Okay, Nick. Now, go
Yeah.
for it.
Tell
on
it
a
to the
lighter note,
Habsburgs.
on a lighter note, let's talk about autism. Oh, that's actually still pretty down. Okay, so I am the creator of The Ripple, as some of you may know.
I am
Comic,
Justice for you.
graphic novel series that is about societal issues, how people treat each other, specifically concerning people with disabilities, not just autism, but mainly that. And I basically wanted to make autism easy for people who aren't to understand. The thing I can't stand about so much media that depicts us, what feels so inauthentic to me is you'll often have this trope of a character who's a screw up at just about everything, can barely even crawl out of bed in the morning or talk, but they have this one special gift, this one neat trick that they can do that redeems them. Now people suddenly care about their well-being. He was completely worthless before, but he can count faster than a computer. That's amazing. And you gotta look at it like the ugly duckling story. If he doesn't become a beautiful swan, does that mean the other ducklings were correct to pick on him? Of course not. And just like that, we shouldn't have to justify our own existence with that one neat potty trick that impresses people. Okay, so before I go any further, just any comments?
Yeah, shades of Rain Man.
I was thinking more about Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
I was thinking that too.
Exactly. The people's worth is only until they like can do something to like perpetuate like the cause of like must deliver all the presents to all the kids in the world. And this kind of like speaks into like my activism or my political ideas is that like, well, you all know I fucking hate capitalism, but that's the thing about like
what?
I never heard that before.
It's not like I yelled on this Hangout that I want a revolution, which is probably why I'm not going to run for public office.
I thought I knew you.
Well, you know, we all want to change the world.
But like, does someone have to like be like special in a way in order to be like allowed to be part of society, to have like the things we all need and we all deserve: a home, food, water, healthcare, and education?
Well, and the thing is, and that same thing comes up with pretty much every marginalized group too, because it's like, you know, we hate black people unless they can play basketball or unless they can do this or that, or they're good singers or whatever. All of a sudden we like them, but you know, the LGBT people.
Probably too bad I have to leave you guys, so I'll catch you later.
All right, thanks, Matthew.
Hey, Matthew.
The thing that bugs me so much about this trope is, I mean, look, a lot of stories about autistic people are written by people who aren't just not autistic themselves, but might not even know anybody in their family. They might have just seen a couple kids at school acting weird and thought, I could write a really inspirational story about not knowing anything about it. Anyway, it's so, you know, people ask me, like, well, what's Minna's superpower? I say she doesn't have one. She shouldn't need one to be justified, to be able to exist. It's like these writers, it's a tacit admission that they just can't think of anything interesting to write about us. They just see it just as a gimmick, just something quick and easy. And that's why I have trouble even like watching things like The Good Doctor or Young Sheldon or whatever. Now, the other thing that bugs me about so many stories about us is age. We focus so much on autism in kids, how to fix your child, that it just creates this weird picture that we don't last very long. Something happens to us when we turn 18. We go away. And again, that's just not the reality for us. So while I do have numerous...
New York.
So while I do have numerous flashbacks in the story, the times when Minna was younger, showing her being, say, overstimulated by lights or sounds, like right here you can see this scene, all these gears and pulleys and such, it's too much for her. It is physically painful to hear. Her older cousin who was looking after her at the time doesn't understand. It's just like, it's not that loud. I can't do anything about it. You're going to get me in trouble. Just her needs to win unattended for a long time, but it starts when she's already 25, and most of the story picks up from there because I wanted to show what it's like to have to continue to live with this day in, day out, and just constantly adjust to it and try to thrive, because it never goes away, and you're the only person you're going to spend your entire life with, so you better learn to be at peace with yourself.
Okay, Nicholas?
Well, I just want to say real quick too. I mean, I think it's important also because, as you said, I think most people who don't have a lot of experience with people with autism, that they have a very narrow understanding of what it is, if they've had it all, and so they only picture, like you said, like a Rain Man type of character, and don't think that there is a spectrum, and it manifests in different ways. That I'm sure you're very familiar with, but I think most people are not. And that every individual is going to be different, and it's not cookie cutter, but unfortunately the media tends to try to put you in a box. Sometimes literally.
Nicholas, I got a couple of points on the curve I'd like you to plot for me. I don't know whether you're familiar with either of these or not. Number one, I brought this up in a couple of Hangouts because I thought that Rami Halleck, or what I thought was a pretty fair job, or again, an impression on Mr. Robot. Have you seen that at all?
I have not.
Okay, so much for that. Okay, now this is probably going to be a lot worse, but Ben Affleck, the accountant.
I have not seen that.
Strike two.
Okay, so have you, Nicholas? Have you seen the latest Predator movie?
The latest what?
Predator movie.
No, I don't watch
Okay.
a lot of movies.
You are not alone, my friend. I haven't seen that.
Yes, well, it had 5 different like plot lines that were trying to go with, some which would have been easy and much more of like their own movie. But again, it had like the kind of like trope, as it were, of like, oh, the autism boy, but he turns out to be like the advanced evolution stage of humanity. So that's why the Predator wanted to like take him and keep him.
Yeah,
Like,
you have that's another trope, is the guy who's just so off in his own little world. He's basically divorced from the rest of the human race. Like they just can't understand the profound experience. So that's why I try to make, when I say I want to make this relatable to other people, it's just that people like her, like me, really aren't that different. We go through the same things other people do. Survivor's guilt, PTSD, mood swings, anxiety, depression, all those things. It's just further compounded by that extra layer of sensory overload baggage that comes with something like autism. It can make it even more difficult to work through those issues because we already have, like our own head, like trying to cave in on itself, basically. And so with this, I just wanted to portray someone who doesn't have, the one unique gift that proves their worth. She does have unique circumstances, which she's able to make the best of. But she's just a normal-ish enough person who's trying to make it through the day and find joy and meaning in life like anyone else, and hopefully people won't make that too difficult for her. Like anyone who doesn't know anything about autism, I hope they'll still be able to get the cues here and there and understand them. Like I have a scene in the first volume where somebody pats her on the shoulder and congratulates her, and she's confused because, well, up until now, people have mostly done that to scold her for being too slow or not paying attention, things like that. And now suddenly it's supposed to be a positive thing. It's like, I wish people would make up their minds. They're just a little self-confused like that.
Yeah, I feel like when people, like, speaking about autism, when non-autistic people write things with autistic characters, like even if they do it with the best intentions, like it can very easily tip from like inspirational to patronizing, like like what you were saying earlier with the trope of like, well, it's what makes you special, it's your superpower. And it's like, yeah, but viewed from a certain angle, that's like a really condescending thing to say.
It's framed as redeeming them, it's the redeeming quality. If they didn't have that, they really would just be a useless lump.
Yeah, if not redeeming, then at least something that can be that is useful or that can be exploited. Again, witness Rain Man.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the mistakes a lot of people fall into who want to be an ally but don't know how to do it. They fall into the condescension,
Yeah. Well, because it's not your job. It's not your job as an ally to be a cheerleader.
Yeah, it's like you could be an ally to gay people, trans people, minorities, people with different states of mind. Sorry, I forget the name for
neurodivergent.
Yeah, neurodivergent.
Also, something I think I must have realized on an unconscious level, subconscious, but just couldn't articulate until right freaking now. I just realized that most autistic people's stories are about guys. For some reason, it's about boys. I guess because those boys are clumsier. There's something inherently funnier about us that makes it easier to understand. I don't know why.
Or maybe the majority of writers being like male as well. Okay, it's the male dominant society. That could be it as well.
Okay. Okay. Statistically, do we know whether or not autism is more prevalent in boys/men versus girls/women?
I believe it is. I think I actually read an article about the invisibility of basically female autists because they're not portrayed like at all in media. People don't recognize the symptoms because I think they tend not to be the same, or they don't display the same.
Well-
I might be confusing it with some other neurodivergent thing, but I think it's autism.
Well, then I
Correct me if I'm
guess
mistaken.
that just makes this story stand out even more. But there's another reason I made her a woman is because, of course, there's how the two are portrayed. It's like men are expected to be like really angry and aggressive, but they're not allowed to cry. And girls, they get to cry, but they can't get angry about anything, or what? They'll be called shrill, hysterical, basically just annoying. Like, oh, just stop. And so I wanted to show a character who is both, because anyone who's lived long enough to lose a family member or something like that will realize that no, those experiences cross over. Oftentimes being angry and mad are the same thing. Sad mad. And so this is one of my favorite illustrations here. You see, just like that, don't come near me, I am hurting and I need to process it in my own way, on my own time. That kind of face. Also, you may have noticed her limbs there. I need to let you guys know she is not a robot, but she has a physical disability on top of the other. She was born with 4 stumps, so she needs prosthetics just to get around. And when we pick up, she's in a really bad way. She just has hand-me-down prosthetics that don't even match, and they're too big and heavy for her. They just don't work right. It really affects her quality of life. And it's some time before she gets better limbs. I'm just trying to find a page that sums it up well. Whatever. So I'm trying to remember what I wanted to say. Oh, yeah. So at the start, you can see this is the sort of shape she's in. She's looking at herself in a mirror. But she gets opportunities as it goes on. She gets some people's attention, and she gets better limbs, and so on. Her quality of life improves. I just don't want to spoil too much of the story.
Is that supposed to be sorry? Is that supposed to be allegorical? Because it makes her look robotic, and of course, people often think of autistic people as being robotic. Is that
maybe a little bit? It does work that way, but I have to be really careful with how I frame it. Where she says that when she reaches out to touch somebody, touch their face or something. If somebody touches her face, she understands that, but there's nothing over there. She doesn't even have phantom limb because there wasn't something to lose. She was just born like this. So oftentimes it feels like she is watching somebody else's arms that her brain tells them to. And it can work as an allegory for how it feels to be autistic sometimes, where you might be trying to make new connections with other people, and it's just so awkward. You may as well be fumbling around in the dark, blindly, not knowing when you're going to bump into something or how it's going to be. So it does work on that. You just have to be careful with the framing.
Yeah.
One interesting thing I'd like to throw out in the midst of all this, in terms of somebody born without limbs, it does indeed happen, because I have to this day a very dear friend who, instead of 2 arms, has a vestigial finger on her left side and 2 fingers which are actually semi-functional on her right. And they tried to fit her with prosthetic arms, and they just never worked out. And she's about my age to this point, and she's gotten along for 60 some odd years with that. So, point on the curve.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you guys on this subject for too long, because I know we only have so much time here. Let me just see if there's anything else I can think of that I want to say. Because I don't want to advertise my own work too much. I want to talk about.
I'll do that for you.
What's it
so,
called?
Planet Ripple.
Planet Ripple.
Yeah.
So the basic gist of the plot is that the world has been flooded for thousands of years, to the point where some people don't even believe there ever was any such thing as land. They think it's a fairy tale. But very suddenly, over the course of just a few years, new islands do start popping up left and right. What would have been mountaintops in our time. And so there's a power struggle over who gets the new lots. And the elites of the world, they hire a vicious pirate gang, these guys, to reserve the land for them, to prevent any hands like minnows from dirtying it. And so she gets roped into this, one thing leads to another, and it just spirals out of control from there.
I like the Marxist analysis there, the class allegory there, by Planet Ripple, a story of a girl with disability finding her way into the world, gone down the drain. PlanetRipple.com. It's
actually, the world hasn't gone down the drain. The drain got stopped up, and everything.
The water was rising. Climate change analogy there too.
Yeah, who's got the snake? You know. Seriously, I've been to Planet Ripple, your site, and I like it a lot. If I had some bucks to spare, and when I do get some bucks to spare, because that brings up sort of a separate topic I might bring up later. But I like the work. I like the feel of it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I object to this premise on religious grounds because in the scripture it clearly says that God will not flood the earth another time.
Okay, who created God?
Well, okay, that's the really mysterious part about it. Like, this is a detail I'll explore in a few years. In future books, I will show how the world became flooded in the first place, but it actually was not global warming. We became so advanced that we fixed all those problems. Something else basically flooded the world overnight.
Wow.
It wasn't a divine intervention. It was just something that went horribly wrong, but I'll explain it in a future book.
Wow, I really like that. I like that idea. We fixed all our problems, and we still flooded the planet.
Oh, I wonder why Steve likes something so similar to Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
I just noticed a pirate hat. Very nice.
That is a sweet hat, too. That is a sweet-ass pirate hat.
Alice, sartorial brilliance, you.
I have a pretty goofy scene where, to show that the pirates in the story don't talk like today's pirates, they just talk like normal people. I have a scene where one is recalling a conversation where a new recruit said, like, "Yar, it must be me booty," and all the other pirates just laughed their asses off. It's like, why would you talk like that? That's ridiculous.
Dave, please don't propagate those stereotypes, man.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are you doing, man? You bring down all of us when you talk that way.
Funny scene where she's watching something like a documentary of sorts, and you see these things they're lifting out of the water. It says, making them the 400th complete set of mysterious golden arches recovered from the seabed in the last century alone. These ruins are believed to have been sites of congregation for a past civilization, and the arches themselves to carry great religious significance.
You're not wrong.
You know what that makes me think of?
Yeah, religious to some people.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever play the role-playing game Gamma World?
No.
An 80s RPG by TSR. Some people made Dungeons and Dragons, and so it was, many years after a nuclear exchange, and so yeah, you in a lot of the folklore, there's kind of stuff like that where people find artifacts and they have no concept of what they actually are, and start worshiping things that are mundane things from our world.
You know what? I would love to play one of those games in a role play as like a bullshit anthropologist who doesn't know anything and makes things up. Oh, I would love to do that.
That'd be fun.
Come across like anything from the old world and be like, oh yes, this was definitely these golden arches were a weapon. They would throw them and they'd return back to you. And why are they 20 feet tall? Because people were giant back then.
It sort of reminds me of one of the Harry Potter vignettes when I'm trying to Mr. Weasley's studying a hairdryer, I think it was. He wasn't quite sure what it was. There was also a routine when anybody remember the series Buck Rogers in the 25th Century.
Yes. Yeah.
They had somebody was studying old artifacts, and I think it was again a hairdryer that he thought was an old 21st century laser. I about died when I saw that.
Hey, you still had to plug them in back then. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brett and really anybody else who's in this hangout, I dropped my Facebook link in our group chat, not in the wide chat.
Well, there's not a live chat on YouTube anyway. So
I turned off the live chat, but
okay. Yeah. And so if you well, actually, I was thinking about maybe running the game if you're interested in that, or if you just want to be my friend on Facebook, hit the link.
You really want to be friends with me, a narco-communist who wants a revolution? Well, I won't post anything on your wall. I'll just post things on my wall. You might scroll past them. It's just like, oh, there's John being a revolutionist again. Okay.
I'm just going to wrap up so we can move on to other topics, because, again, I didn't want to eat up the whole airtime to myself. I hope that everything I've said so far has been decently interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was.
So, look, I just want to show a wider breadth of emotional experiences than I've seen in media depicting us. I wanted to humanize us because it's too easy to just spread awareness of everything that's scary about autism and just leave it at that.
Yeah.
But we don't spread understanding and acceptance of autistic people enough. And that's the most important part. Like, there's so much fear mongering around us. And look, what I'm about to talk about, this is a really touchy issue. But to make it clear, I am pro-choice, but I am against eugenics.
Mm-hmm.
And what I can't stand about certain organizations that claim to speak on our behalf, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, but all they do is manage to marginalize us further by making autism seem like a fate worse than death, like the scariest thing in the world.
Yeah.
I do want people to be able to get abortions, but I would like them to be informed not by stereotypes, but to understand before they make that decision. And what I can't stand about like certain groups is they're basically trying to devise a prenatal test so they can tell well before someone comes out if they might be born autistic. So that then parents who have only ever heard of how terrible autism is can abort just in a panic and try to shoot for a nice, normal, healthy child next time. That's what I can't stand.
Well, here's the thing about that too. I have yet to see. Maybe I've been living in a closet or something, but I don't think I've ever heard of any genetic markers that even remotely hint at autism. I mean, like I say, I think it's it's something.
People are trying to find one. It's like trying to isolate some bully gene. There's like an autism gene now.
Yeah,
and
well, there's supposedly a gay gene too, but I mean, I still think the jury's out on that one.
Yeah.
I'm trying to humanize us because I know there are some people in the world who, if they had their way, would completely remove us from the gene pool because they think that like we're some disease that needs to be cured. They don't want us passing our harmful genes along and messing up the next generation by making them more autistic or something like that.
Well, if they're going to take a shot at something like that, I'd be astonished that they haven't already taken a shot at black people, Orientals, the whole 9 yards.
Well, that's kind of
from a genetic standpoint.
Yeah, not maybe I was going to say I think they have, just not from a genetic standpoint.
But yeah, the target there is way. I mean, the bullseye's the size of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Anyway, to wrap it up, if anyone wants to just check out my work, I have released an early draft of Volume 1 for free. You can find all the pages on my website. Again, it's an older draft, so there were some things, some typos and such that I fixed in the final release. But if you want to get a rough idea of what the story's about, you can see it there, warts and all. And it's actually worked pretty well. It's actually worked pretty well for me because I do pretty regularly get messages from people saying like, hey, where can I get the other books? I got to see what happens next. The way I see it, if an entire first book isn't enough to hook somebody, that person's a lost cause. They were never really going to like it much. And I swear this is the very last thing I want to say. This is not related to autism, but it's just another thing that ended up interesting. Representation is so important because if you represent somebody badly, well, it's almost preferable to not be represented at all, because then people will just be indifferent to your existence rather than openly hostile or malicious because of something bad they saw that, pay you in a weird light. So there are some things that I just don't dare touch. I want to focus on disabilities and such because, well, if I do branch into other territory, even other disabilities, I really want to understand so I don't accidentally make things worse for that group. However, something kind of interesting happened. I wound up writing a trans character in the story by complete accident. It just worked out that way. It just worked out for the best. And at first, I panicked because I realized this character was one of the pirates. And so I thought, oh no, one of the villains. But then I realized it actually works out kind of beautifully because not once anywhere in the story is the character ever attacked for their gender identity. Nobody dead names them. Nobody misgenders them or makes fun of them for it. Nobody acts like it's weird. They're just allowed to present as who they want to be because it's just not seen as an issue. Yeah. They're just allowed to be themselves. No qualifications.
Well,
what a concept.
Well, and that's good because I think, because I remember when Basic Instinct came out and there was kind of a kerfuffle because the Sharon Stone's character was at least bisexual, if not gay. And so there was a lot of positive over that about, well, so there's finally a gay character and she's the villain. And I think the really issue is like, were they a villain and they happen to be gay, or were they a villain or trans or whatever, or were they a villain but and that's like a central feature of it? Just like, I got, or are there any other representations like back in the 70s when the only black people were servants, pimps, and hookers?
Yeah, I'm going to try to make one of Mina's best friends a non-binary character. That's something I planned from very early on. I don't want the only trans character to be one of the antagonists, but at least none of their actions are informed by their transness. They're not bad because of that. They're not even bad. They're one of the best characters in the whole thing. As soon as they walked in, people fell in love with the character. And once they find out that the character is trans, I don't think they should take any issue with that. Oh, I believe she had something to say. Yes?
I did want to ask, do you think there's any media that has a good representation of autistic people?
On occasion, but very rarely. I think there was this movie called Adam. I think that's one of the only examples I can think of that had a somewhat dignified portrayal of it. That wasn't just a weird caricature. The guy didn't have this one special talent. He just had his special interests, his little obsessions and hobbies. And he was just trying to branch out and thrive. And by the end of the movie, he hasn't really changed that much. He's just in an environment where he's just allowed to be himself more, and people appreciate him for it. He didn't have to change himself in some huge way to accommodate the rest of society.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. If I have one message for autistic people, anyone with something like this who feels debilitated, don't let anyone try to turn you into a different person. It's just going to happen. We're not even the same person we were a month ago. And you should try to improve yourself, but not necessarily by being less autistic. Just try to add more things to yourself. Get a wider range of experiences and just try to see what works for you. Because I don't even like referring to it as a spectrum, because that implies that people towards one end of it are basically subhuman. And yes, there are severe cases, but that's not most or even a lot of them. I tend to look at it more as just, I guess, like a field, and everyone winds up on a different place in it. Everyone's experience is different. There are no two cases that are exactly the same. But anyway, I'm sorry, I've rambled on long enough.
No,
okay.
it's been
totally
great.
Fine. Besides, I personally don't think I don't like the idea of someone being above someone else anyway. Well, I'm an anarchist. I question all hierarchies. Hierarchies have to justify themselves, and so yeah.
Well, just to be clear, spectrum does not necessarily by itself say it's a hierarchy. I mean, gender is a spectrum.
Right.
Exactly.
Unless you're a misogynist, you don't think that one gender is better than the other. Therefore, it's just
that's right.
It is.
Yeah.
And
However,
personality is also a spectrum.
Could you say it's more variations on a theme?
Go ahead, Alice.
Do you agree that autistic spectrum is generally seen as higher functioning, lower functioning, so it does become a hierarchy? And I agree with that.
Yeah, it's more about how society has accepted to interpret it that made it kind of problematic. The idea itself isn't, it's just what people make of it on a wide enough level.
In society, we need to change it. We need to fix it.
I mean, that's pretty much the case for any kind of discrimination. That was what I was thinking when you were talking there about, like people trying to come up with the genetic test and, trying to screen out people who might be autistic,
test tube babies.
All of
I actually wanted to talk about something as well. Because you did mention eugenics earlier, and the one thing that I find always so weird about eugenics is it sounds like it could be useful, but the people who always put forward the idea of eugenics always have this mean-spirited version of it, where they're trying to eliminate groups of people they don't like and shit like that. Instead of like the eugenics where it's oh, let's get rid of MS, instead of the eugenics where it's oh, let's like
Brown
cure all
people.
these diseases by just going in and genetically
Then
modifying
they start
the
talking
code.
about nose size and stuff. You know,
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
to make it clear,
Yeah,
I,
and then,
I-
then
again,
it's
I am pro-abortion. What basically what I'm saying is, if somebody knows generally about autism, if they aren't just informed by scaremongering, you know, just stereotypes, if they, and they know like some of the nuances and facts, and they still decide to abort the what could be autistic baby, perfectly fine. I just again don't want them to do it in a panic because they've only ever heard of how terrible we are.
Yeah. And then you get into the whole business from Gattaca. And Gattaca was an amazing movie, but it's one of those movies which I watched once and I don't think I could bring myself to watch it again. Just really, I mean, it's brilliant in what it says, but boy, the bad taste in my mouth I haven't lost to this day.
Well, one thing, you know, about Nick's point about representation too, that and this is something that I've struggled with. You know, I want to start writing kind of generic products for RPGs, so something that could work with any system, and so it's more informational that you could basically build a campaign out from. And you know, I would like the characters that I build, and because basically I'm going to give information through a course of a story. And you know, you want to have representation. The tough part, okay, so I'm a cis hetero male man, you know, whatever, and so so how do I, you know, and I'm, you know, as far as I know, not what was the word, neuroatypical or whatever
the neurodivergent.
Neurodivergent.
So I'm not that either, so, to my knowledge. So the thing is like, yeah, how when you don't have the context, how do you on the one? It's hard to, I think, on the one hand, represent people that you're not accurately in a way that isn't pandering, isn't patronizing, is not you know, in any way you know, negative. But then if you don't, then now you're basically, it's erasure. So
Okay, my advice: just normalize it. Just put it in your book and don't make it a big. If you're not specifically trying to, you know, show like how these people are treated today, I like to envision a society where these things just aren't issues anymore, where these people are just accepted, basically Star Trek. So I find this, but if you do want to tackle the ins and outs, the, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, just talk to people. You know, just put the word out there and ask people about their experiences, and not just anecdotally. You know, try to talk to a lot of different people. Like, here's an example. In the latest one I'm working on, Volume 5, I have a scene where this trans character who transitioned from female to male, they show up for a party of sorts, like a birthday party, and they're wearing a T-shirt that has like 2 doors, and one says "out of order," the other says "please use other door." And the thing is, I put that in there after asking people, specifically, you know, trans female to males, how they felt about those parts. And some of them hate it, just can't wait to get rid of them. Some of them are indifferent, and some of them like to poke fun at it. So I thought, okay, I'm going to make my character the kind that pokes fun at it in subtle ways. So while I don't explicitly state, you know, that part, just them wearing a goofy shirt like that is a subtle, you know, bit of foreshadowing, I guess you could say. But I only did that after consulting, you know, quite a few people and seeing how they felt about it, learning about their experiences, what they do to cope with certain things. And I find that really is just the best thing to do is just talk to them. And it's easier than ever with the internet and things like Discord.
Right. I just want to add, because like I saw this like YouTube video by Tumrific Tariq, who did a video essay of how to black, and the catalyst of that was like people's reaction to like the Craig of the Creek cartoon being aired on Cartoon Network, and how people responded to like, oh, they're making Craig a black character just for like tokenism and SJW points. But at the end of that, he brought up like Good Times, a sitcom in the 80s, where it's like the cast was all black, but all the writers and all the creative teams were white. Now, they did do that well because they handled the subject with care. Because if there's anything that the writers did not know about, they consulted with the black actors about this experience. And the black actors also can like get like first dibs on the script, and then they can go and ask any of the writers, what is this about? What's the intention with this kind of joke that you're writing? And then if there's a problem, then they can find something less derogatory. So I think it's important to listen to others and let someone else talk.
And along those same lines, you remember the show What's Happening?
Oh yeah.
So there was one particular episode where Roger gets noted for his writing, and so he writes a story about a young black teen, and it's fictional, but it's kind of semi-autobiographical. And so it gets noticed by some studio execs, and they decide that they want to him to come and join and be part of the creative staff on a TV show. And so basically he starts writing real stuff, about poor black kids, and the execs like, well, we don't want that. We just want the hey mans and what it is and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And
that's what I'm talking about.
Exactly. It's all, they want the catchphrases and they want to seem hip. And Roger's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested in that. Because the guy's like, he's like, yeah, but this is he goes because I guess the kid getting a very meager allowance, and he's like, and they're like, oh, well, he should be able to do this, and like, no, black kids, poor people don't get that kind of allowance, and the exec's like, well, people don't want, America doesn't want to know that black people are poor, and
well, guess what?
Yeah. Guess what?
Building off about what both Joe and Nicholas said about, trying to write characters from basically a perspective that you don't have, or of any sort. Because, of course, that's always been kind of a big problem with Hollywood or in writing in general is the strong female character, where you have a bunch of men who are writing the scripts and what have you, and they just don't know how to write women. And, of course, that's big an issue. In fact, I'm trying to counter that myself in my own writing. So I got a bunch of books from female authors with female leads. Just going through these, trying to get a better sense of how to do that in my own writing as well.
Well, and the other thing is like, and I've thought about this a lot when thinking about because writers, usually white male writers, will rebel at the idea, and they'll be like, well, so I'm not allowed to write a black character, so I'm not allowed to write a woman or whatever. And I think that would be way less of a concern if there were more people from different backgrounds who had the opportunity to tell their own stories.
Yeah, black filmmakers.
If representation doesn't go hand in hand with participation, then you don't want just a bunch of white people adding black characters into their movies and then being like, there, see, representation. Like that's not anything.
Well, there, see, stereotypes.
And that's the reason why I think I'll mention three recent movies that did incredibly well, and I think because of they were done, representation was done properly. First was Wonder Woman, which was marvelous. So you had a strong woman character, lead, and she's not any of the stereotypes. And it was, of course, written predominantly by a woman, and it's an excellent story, and everyone loved it. Black Panther, it was beyond the fact that it made a shit ton of money. It was amazing in that. Black writers and black actors and black director, and it's. I originally said it's unapologetically African, and a black friend of mine corrected me and said, no, it's actually joyously African.
Yeah.
That's much better.
And so and it's like, well, I remember, and it's funny because when I saw that the guy with the plate in his lip, I cringed and I realized and then I stopped myself and I realized what I was doing, and I spent my whole life trying to be acceptable to white society. So that made me uncomfortable at first, and I said, "Then wait a minute, there's white custom, the Highlander Scots painting themselves with woad and we don't get weird, so fuck it, But
Scottish men wear skirts, and men wearing skirts is hot.
That's right. And then also Captain Marvel. Despite the haters' attempt to destroy the movie, it did amazing. Because again, it wasn't any of the things that people try to make it. So, I think, and I think that's the reason why it's interesting when you see the audience. Why Black Panther did so amazingly domestically in the United States, where Captain Marvel did better on the world stage. And why? Because it was, the African story really was talking about the Black American story.
Mm-hmm.
So it resonated here. So I think it had more meaning here. And whereas, Captain Marvel, women are everywhere. So
wait, what?
And women and oppression of women is everywhere. So I think it resonated with women around the world.
Women are everywhere except China, apparently. So.
Yeah.
One of my favorite
bring it
character
back to eugenics.
Yeah, Alice bringing the dark jokes. I love it.
I got 2 notes.
One of my favorite
But-
character archetypes is the sort who, look, characters who are unstoppable, who can just stand there and take everything, except for exceptional cases like Superman. Most of those kinds of characters are boring to me. I like the kind of character who can always rise back up, who is brittle, easy to break, but somehow they manage to pull the pieces of themselves back together every time and come back again. There's just something about that is so moving to me. And those are some of the strongest people I've ever known in life. People who you look at them, you wouldn't think they were that strong, but they have endured things that would make other people go insane or just give up completely.
That's why I love Cap pulling the strap tight on his suit.
I was thinking of the exact same thing.
Yeah,
and that's a white guy, but still, it's the idea of you're facing unstoppable odds and you're still standing up to fight.
And the image that sticks with me enormously with Captain Marvel, you've probably seen this T-shirt: "Fall down 7 times, get up 8."
Yeah.
If there's any message that comes out of that, that's the one for me. Yeah. I mean, you get back up, you get back in it.
And that's a universal one. It just it happens to be a female one that has that's kind of other things that tie to it. It's like, why don't you smile more? And boy, do the man babies hate that.
Well, when we start talking about including people with various disabilities and stuff like that in writing, we already know how to make it normalized without making a thing out of it, and it's right here. I mean,
yeah.
Even going back to Star Trek, Geordi's blindness was treated like he's got this superpower because of his visor. It wasn't normalized. It was treated as different, and therefore he's got a superpower. Where in real life, that's not how it is. It's just there's differences in different people, and we know how to do that. You write a character with glasses, that doesn't become their defining trait.
One
it's
of my
just somebody who has glasses.
You just reminded me of something. You just reminded me of something so important. Okay, this is one of my favorite writing techniques, and I advise other people to try this out.
Steve, are you listening?
Mina's not the only person in my story with a disability. There are others. However, I don't reveal their disability the second they show up. Yeah. What I often like to do is introduce a character in one volume, then reveal their disability in a later volume. That way, because not everything is completely visible. I have a character who's introduced in volume 2, and we learn some things about her there. But then in volume 3, while she's out in public with some friends, she realizes it's been a while since she took her pills. So she takes some, and it's just treated as no thing, except one of the other characters wonders, wait, what are those for? Are you sick? And she says, I was born without a thyroid. I've always been sick. Now, I know this doesn't count as a disability, but it's still a complication. It's still something that affects somebody's ability to live. And, well, one of my family members, one of my cousins, was born without a thyroid. And she and her mother get asked all sorts of annoying questions, like, why don't you get a transplant of some kind? Well, then you have to take a second type of medication for the rest of her life to keep her body from rejecting that. So it really wouldn't be any different from how things are now. So I learned about things like that, and I was able to put it in that scene. But the thing is, we'd already had time to get to know that character and understand why they're interesting. Then we found out that they were dealing with this the whole time. That just makes them retroactively even more interesting. Yep. But if you lean into that right away, it's like a character shows up. It's like, hi, I have diabetes. That's my entire character trait. Bye.
And that's the stereotype that the man babies, the anti-SJWs complain about. It's like I heard like people, they got this autism and baby into this like commercial just for forced diversity.
And you know they'll also do that thing where they're like, oh, they just made this person suddenly, you know, they just made them autistic all of a sudden. It's like, no, they were the whole time. They just did not reveal.
There's also just that people in real life might not want to, throw that out there immediately.
Yeah,
because then they'll be judged on that.
It's like Mr. Ratburn's wedding, the thing that everyone got all upset about over Arthur, where they banned that episode in Alabama.
Oh yeah.
It's like
Alabama,
because him being gay wasn't necessary for his character. He just was, and it's like it didn't matter until that episode. Like,
Alabama is its own micronation at this point.
Oh God, I got something about Alabama. But I just want to say first that Katie, I really appreciate what you said, because that's like, as somebody with increasingly bad eyesight, I've had glasses my whole life, and I for me it's a rush to see what will heart disease or blindness get me first, But
Joe just out dark Alice.
I'm gonna get a little darker.
Oh boy,
Alabama. My father is from there, and with all the latest shit with all the anti-abortion laws, and now there was some poor woman who was shot. She got into an argument with some dude, and got into an argument, and then the dude shot her in the belly, and it killed her fetus. And now they're charging her, and they're not charging him at all. Not even malicious wounding, nothing.
Yeah.
They're saying it's her fault because she instigated the argument, as if getting was tantamount to saying it's okay to get shot. And so I said to a friend, I would suggest that we nuke Alabama back to the Stone Age, but that would only knock them back about a week.
Another serious point, there was a recent UN report that was released last month that the highest rates of hookworm in a developed country was in one particular county in Alabama, where they actually do not have running sewage or running water. You have to go to a well in order to draw the water or something like that, and it's almost like. I hate to do this, but we're coming to the point where only in Alabama can there be such poverty that there's high cases of hookworm in a developed country.
Is it poverty, or is it just that they don't give a damn? They can't. The state government can't be bothered to dig in there and take care of business.
Well,
there's some corruption in the Alabama government. Yes,
a little bit of both. It's a bit of both. I mean, there's poverty, but in part, it kind of feeds itself, because you've had decades of conservative policies that are bad for the economy and specifically bad for most of the poor population. And so it feeds itself, so it's kind of Mississippi's is the same thing. The two most religious states, the two most conservative states, the two poorest states.
Just think of what a
causation. However, and the thing is, it's. And also they're also the biggest taker states. That's the funny part about it is the right wingers always talk about the welfare states. Those two states are the fucking welfare state. They get
the blue states subsidize the red states. But think of what a condemnation it is of America. States like that especially, but America in general, that they're basically saying, look, getting shot in the stomach is something you should just expect at any given moment, and you should know to not get someone angry because they can just do that. That's basically what you're saying.
Can we
it's the effect of those standard ground laws.
Yeah. Shall we also mention the fact that the shooter was let go?
Well, exactly. Not a single charge. I mean,
he stood his ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the thing that's so fucked up, because even if you were somehow to go along with this twisted logic that she's at fault for what happened to her fetus, he still attacked her. Just what about what he did to her? I mean, so yeah. Well, of course, if you don't give a fuck about women at all, it's easy to just say, "Oh, well, let him go."
Okay. Well, one thing I'd like to know is it'd be interesting to hear a little bit more about what the exact circumstances of that confrontation were. Was she just using words, or was she actually getting physical with this guy? And even if she was getting physical, since when does that justify pulling out a weapon?
Yeah, it doesn't. Well, this is the other thing.
What was she wearing?
Right, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Not right wingers, the ones that they complain that PC is stifling free speech. but they also believe in the whole concept of fighting words that are so terrible that they're justification for physical violence. So how the fuck do you, on the one hand, say I'm for free speech, absolutely, and I should be able to say nigger and all these other horrible things?
Yeah, my younger brother argued that.
But there's fighting words, just not the ones that I like to use.
It's weird how that
you
works.
can say words like that, but let's not call them concentration camps.
I just want to before we wrap up, I want to bring it back a little bit to representation and participation, because for completely selfish reasons, because I saw an opportunity to talk about professional wrestling.
Go ahead.
And I don't want to miss that opportunity.
Well, we already got to Star Trek, so you might as well get to
we talked about Star Trek a little bit, so I want to talk about pro wrestling. Well, because and what Nicholas was saying about having a character that has a particular trait, but not making their autism or their race or their gender identity like the thing about them, right? Which I think is really super important and a good lesson for anybody, regardless of their background or their identity, who wants to be a writer and write about diverse characters. There for the last couple years, there have finally been mostly on the independent circuit, wrestlers getting work and becoming like known quantities who are trans or who are gay. And there are a few examples that where like there's a woman who works for All Elite Wrestling, which is just starting up. I don't know what her real name is, but her working name is Nyla Rose, and she's a trans woman, and she's not the trans wrestler, right? And I love that. I am so relieved to see that a major company, or what will hopefully be a major company soon, hired a trans woman to be a wrestler, and she's not the trans wrestler. In fact, I don't even know if they've even mentioned it on one of their broadcasts yet. It's been mentioned like on their social media and stuff, and she's very open about it, but it hasn't been like, she hasn't been marketed as, see, look.
They just treat it as normal. That's
exactly.
Just like whatever.
And there's a guy who wrestles mostly on the independent circuit named Mike Perro, who is gay. And again, he's not the gay wrestler. He's just a guy who happens to be one of the many things he is. And, and again, he's gaining some popularity and some success. And because wrestling is one of those forms of entertainment that does so many things horribly wrong.
Oh yeah.
And has done for so long. Like when it actually does something a little bit right, that to me, that's like, hopefully that's like a leading indicator. It's like, oh shit, if there's wrestling companies finally starting to get this at least a little tiny bit, maybe that could be a gauge of like, oh, we're very, very slowly, we're starting to move in a positive direction.
If something as manly as half-naked oiled men grabbing onto each other can finally get the idea.
I've always said,
oil myself up. I'm going to be the ultimate champion, ultimate warrior.
I've always said that wrestling, particularly men's professional wrestling, is the most simultaneously homoerotic and homophobic thing that is produced. And I would love to see it be way less homophobic. I don't have a huge problem. I don't have a problem with the homoeroticism. It might be interesting if they would actually own that part of it. They pretend that part of it doesn't happen, but it's to see it actually gradually inch toward being a little bit more acceptable in a lot of those ways is very nice to see.
Well,
so
two things to that. One, it's also good since we, as you know, like I just said, the wrestling tends to be homophobic and racist and all other things. So and because its audience, to a large degree is. So it's interesting then that those two people they're doing and they're succeeding even in that environment, that it's not become a thing. And same way, and for the same reasons why I always loved the wrestler Goldberg, because he didn't change his name. He didn't he's just like, I'm a big Jewish guy and I'm gonna kick your ass.
Goldberg, what an amazing
and they did,
name.
and that's a great example, because he wasn't the Jewish wrestler.
Right.
Like, that was just a part of who he was, and his gimmick was not directly related to him being Jewish at all, but it wasn't something that he tried to hide.
Exactly.
So look, before we wrap things up, look, I'm sorry, we had a laundry list of other topics to cover, and
that was just suggestions anyway, and now those going to be posted for like next month, and I only will like delete like the ones that are topical, but I guess some of those things are just like always like
I will never eat this much of a stream just peddling my own products again.
It was fine,
but just as a general message, I don't want this to just be an autistic person's story, because it's basically a PSA, and I'm trying to make it more than that, more than all these stories that I've seen in media. And just like that, no like autistic person, no disabled person is just their disability. It's not their entire personality. There should be other interesting things about them, to be valued. And that's why I try to approach characters that way. So I try to approach the story that way. I just think that people should be treated that way. That, there's something much bigger in there. It's just that surface level, immediately noticed part. Again, it's just skin deep.
Besides, it's not like just one thing that's about like one person. I may be an anarchist, but I'm also a video gamer. Steve Shives is an atheist, but he also loves Star Trek. There's always multiple facets of like multiple people. And I will just quickly mention that audience at home, below in the comments, I'm going to post a list of like a bunch of charity links to like our friends and comrades who need money. So you can either share around like the GoFundMe campaigns or the like begging bowls, or if you have a bit of money, you can give them to those like people. As well. So yes, a pirate that's dressed up as Sailor Moon, Sailor Scouts, is providing charity links down below. I will dress up as Robin Hood at future Hangouts.
You are clearly a geek for all seasons.
Anime geek, video game geek.
Steve, I just make my second point really fast.
Yes, go for it, please.
I don't think it's an accident, the fact that, you said about wrestling being both homophobic and homoerotic. Because it does go to the point, like, certainly not every homophobic person has gay tendencies, but I do think it's just kind of funny almost, because this audience that's got that. I think that people who anyone who's trying to suppress any kind of natural instincts or urges because their subculture tells them they have to. It wouldn't be surprising that it comes out in other ways.
Yep.
Yeah. Joe, 2 words. Ted Haggard.
Amen.
Yeah. All right. So as some random geek said, and actually I added the charity links that we had in our format on the Google Doc to the description of this video, but I didn't do it until after we went on the air. So anybody watching us live, if you want you can either wait for Geek to put up the comment or just refresh, and it'll be in the description. But yeah,
it's right there now. I see it right now.
Oh, can you see it right now? Well, there you go. So anyway, that's it for our Patreon hangout for this month. And I'm glad we had a couple people that don't always get in to have some fresh voices, and it was cool to have a topic for most of the show. So thanks, Nick, for that. No, it was great. You don't have to apologize. It was terrific. So yeah, this is something I do every month with my Patreon patrons. If you enjoy what I do on YouTube and you want to help me out, you can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives. And also please check out the links to help out our friends who are in need of a little assistance.
Fuck capitalism.
Fuck capitalism. Next month, I want everybody to wear awesome pirate hats, or you're not getting in.
I have plenty to spare.
It'll just be it'll be me and Alice and Geek, and that'll be it.
Pride Month! Happy Pride Month!
Happy Pride! Yes, absolutely. It's the last day of Pride Month.
Yep,
Happy
I'm
Pride
going
Month,
to Pride
everybody.
Seattle after this. Yeah,
go right. Awesome.
Trans rights.
Everybody says trans rights. Exactly. God damn it. Fucking 2019. Jesus Christ.
High rights.
Okay. That's a good trans rights is the perfect point to end it on, I think. Bye everybody. We'll see you next month.